The wind rolled across the open plains like a living thing, carrying dust, the scent of dry grass, and the faint jingle of spurs. Ava Sinclair tugged her worn denim jacket tighter around herself as she finished securing a restless colt inside the corral. Her ranch, if one could call a struggling, nearly bankrupt patch of land with a leaning barn rancha, had seen better days. But Ava wasn't the type to give up. She'd inherited this place from her father, and she intended to fight for it with everything she had. She just hadn't expected her life to change on an ordinary Tuesday morning. That was the day she saw him. He came riding over the ridge as though he'd stepped straight out of one of those old Western novels her father used to read. Broad shoulders, a weathered face half shadowed by a dusty hat, and a horse far too fine for a wanderer. Yet everything about him said drifter. His coat was ragged, boots worn, beard untrimmed, and he rode with the slow, easy confidence of a man who didn't owe time or explanations to anyone. Ava's hand tightened subconsciously around the rope in her fist. Strangers didn't usually wander this far into her land unless they needed fuel, water, or trouble. The cowboy brought his horse to a gentle stop and tipped his hat. "Ma'am." Ava raised a brow. "Long way from town, aren't you?" He gave a slow shrug. "Didn't realize I was on anyone's land till I saw you working. I can turn around if I'm trespassing." His voice was deep, steady, but carried a kind of loneliness she couldn't explain. Before she could respond, the colt behind her kicked against the gate, drawing a burst of frustration from Ava. "Great, just what I need," she muttered. The stranger dismounted with a calm, fluid motion. "You want a hand?" Ava lifted her chin. "I don't need help." The colt bucked again, nearly knocking her back. Her heels dug into the dirt, but she struggled to keep her grip. The cowboy stepped closer, not touching her, but offering the strength of his presence. "Just say the word." Her pride wanted to refuse. Her reality needed help. "Fine," she grumbled. Together, they managed to settle the frantic colt, easing it into its stall until it calmed. The cowboy handled the animal with surprising skill, gentle, confident, attentive. When they were done, he stepped back, brushing dust from his hands as though he hadn't just saved her half an hour of wrestling. Ava exhaled. "Thanks, a broken bar stranger." "Name's Cole," he said simply. Cole Mercer. The name tugged at her memory, but she couldn't place it. Probably some ranch hand drifting wherever the work took him. "Well, Cole Mercer," she said. "What brings you this far off the road?" He hesitated. Just a flicker, so quick she wondered if she imagined it. "Needed some quiet." "Needed to a broken bar, think." His eyes drifted toward the horizon, and there it was again, that loneliness hidden beneath his calm exterior. If Ava had known then how much truth lay behind his simple words, she might have asked more questions. But instead, she nodded. "If you need water or a place for your horse to rest, the trough's behind the barn. Use what you need." "You don't even know me." "If you meant trouble, I'd already know," she replied firmly. A faint smile tugged the corner of his mouth. "You're a sharp one." Ava lifted her chin. "Someone around here has to be." She turned to return to her chores, assuming he'd drink and move along. But as the hours passed, Cole didn't leave. He saddled his horse, helped her repair a loose fence post, even shared a quiet moment watching the sun dip behind the hills. A stranger, a drifter, a man carrying wounds she couldn't see, and Ava Sinclair, stubborn, independent, and tired of fighting life alone. Ava felt something shift. Later that evening, when he finally mounted his horse to leave, he looked back at her ranch one last time. For a brief second, Ava wondered why his eyes softened the way they did, as though he'd seen this place before, as though it meant something. But she brushed off the thought. She had no idea that the drifter cowboy who'd stumbled into her life was anything but poor. She didn't know his last name wasn't just Mercer, it was Mercer, as in the Mercer family, the ones who owned half the land, half the cattle, and half the power in the entire state. She didn't know he wasn't lost. He was running from legacy, from betrayal, from heartbreak. And she definitely didn't know that meeting her had changed something in him too, because Cole Mercer hadn't loved in years. But for the first time in a long time, a broken bar, he felt something more than loneliness, something that scared him, something that made him want to stay just a little longer. The next morning brought with it a sharp, amber sunrise, cutting across the open plains like gold spilled from heaven. The shadows of the barn stretched across the dusty ground as Claire opened the door. still carrying the warmth of sleep in her eyes. She expected the cowboy Eliasa to be gone by now, disappearing the way mysterious men often do in stories. But instead, she found him already awake, standing behind the barn, tightening the saddle straps on the old roan mare he'd rescued the night before. His movements were steady, deliberate, almost tender toward the horse. The mare nudged him with trust that surprised Claire. Animals never warmed up to strangers this quickly, but something about Elias told her he wasn't the kind of man anyone or anything remained a stranger to for long. He carried a quiet gravity, the type that drew things toward him without effort. Claire folded her arms. "Early start, cowboy." He glanced up, eyes warm with that same unreadable softness. "Sun doesn't wait for anyone," he replied. "Especially not me." There it was again, of that hint of sadness, or memory, or something old and unspoken. It pulled at her curiosity like a thorn snagging fabric. "You don't have to rush off," she said, trying to sound casual. "You didn't even eat breakfast." Elias lifted the saddlebag and swung it over the mare's back. "Didn't want to cause trouble." "Car trouble's one thing, overstaying's another." Claire caught the brief flicker in his eyes, a familiar defensiveness. She knew that look. She'd worn it for years after her father died and strangers acted like they knew what she should do with the ranch he left her. She recognized a man accustomed to leaving before anyone asked him to. "You're not overstaying," she said gently. "Besides, most folks don't fix an entire broken-down engine in one night." "I owe you." He paused, tightening the final strap. "You don't owe me anything, Miss Claire." It was how he said her name, a soft, almost reverend, that made her heartbeat shift. She wasn't used to being seen like that. Not by ranch hands, not by suitors, not by anyone. She cleared her throat and pointed toward the house. "Come inside. At least eat. I'd feel bad if you rode out hungry." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Well, I don't want you feeling bad now." Back inside, Claire prepared coffee and eggs while Elias stood quietly near the door, as if afraid he'd track dust on her clean floor. She watched him from the corner of her eye, the way he took off his hat respectfully, the way he waited to be told where to sit, the way he seemed unfamiliar with being treated kindly. Something about that puzzled her. He looked like a man who'd known the world at its rough edges, its heartbreaks, its silent distances, but maybe not gentleness. They ate at the small wooden table by the window. "So," Claire started, "where are you headed?" Elias sipped his coffee before answering. "Nowhere specific." "That sounds like a lie," she said boldly. His eyebrow lifted. "You always this direct?" "I run a ranch alone," she replied. "Being shy doesn't help much." He chuckled, a quiet, warm sound that filled the room more than laughter should have. "Well then, I guess I'm headed wherever the road takes me." That's another vague answer. Maybe I'm a vague man. Claire leaned forward. "Number. You're running from something." Silence fell. Elias didn't flinch, but something in his jaw tightened just for a moment. He set down the fork with a soft clink. "I'm not running," he said finally. "Just a broken bar choosing peace." "From what?" "From memories that don't belong in the present." Claire didn't push, though every part of her wanted to. Something deep inside her recognized the loneliness in him, like a mirror she didn't expect to find in a stranger. When breakfast ended, Elias stood and carried his dishes to the sink before she could stop him. He reached for his hat, ready to leave. "You really going?" she asked. He nodded. "You've got your life. I've got mine. Wouldn't want to trouble you more than I already have." "Trouble?" she echoed. "Elias, you saved one of my best mares. You fixed my truck. You scared off those coyotes last night. If that's trouble, I could use more of it." His eyes softened again, but the distance in them remained. "I'm not someone people keep around, Claire, but that's their loss." He hesitated, looking at her as if those words reached somewhere he'd locked shut long ago. Then he gently touched the brim of his hat in a polite farewell. "Before he could step outside," she said, "at least let me drive you into town. Your horse needs rest." He shook his head. "I'll come back for my truck later. I'll be all right." Claire stepped closer. "At least tell me your real name." He stilled. She thought he wouldn't answer, but then after a long breath he said, "Elias McRae." The name sparked something in her memory. A ranching empire, thousands of acres, a family known all across the state, a fortune built on cattle, oil, land, a broken bar and loss. But it couldn't be him. The Elias McRae from the news disappeared years ago after a tragedy. He wasn't a drifter. He wasn't a quiet, wandering cowboy. He was a man worth hundreds of millions. She stared at him, stunned. But Elias simply tipped his hat again, walked toward the road, and mounted the mare as if nothing he said mattered. As he rode away, Claire's thoughts raced. If he really was Elias McRae, a broken bar, why was he hiding? Why was he alone? Why was he living like a man with nothing? And most of all, why did she already feel like she wanted him to stay?